Lesson 57. Today let us review these ideas. 31. I am not the victim of the world I see. How can I be the victim of a world that can be completely undone if I so choose? My chains are loosened. I can drop them off merely by desiring to do so. The prison door is open. I can leave simply by walking out. Nothing holds me in this world. Only my wish to stay keeps me a prisoner. I would give up my insane wishes and walk into the sunlight at last. 32. I have invented the world I see. I made up the prison in which I see myself. All I need do is recognize this, and I am free. I have deluded myself into believing it is possible to imprison the Son of God. I was bitterly mistaken in this belief which I no longer want. The Son of God must be forever free. He is as God created him, and not what I would make of him. He is where God would have him be, and not where I thought to hold him prisoner. 33. There is another way of looking at the world. Since the purpose of the world is not the one I ascribe to it, there must be another way of looking at it. I see everything upside down, and my thoughts are the opposite of truth. I see the world as a prison for God's Son. It must be then that the world is really a place where he can be set free. I would look upon the world as it is, and see it as a place where the Son of God finds his freedom. 34. I could see peace instead of this. When I see the world as a place of freedom, I realize that it reflects the laws of God instead of the rules I made up for it to obey. I will understand that peace, not war, abides in it, and I will perceive that peace also abides in the hearts of all who share this place with me. 35. My mind is part of God's. I am very holy. As I share the peace of the world with my brothers, I begin to understand that this peace comes from deep within myself. The world I look upon has taken on the light of my forgiveness and shines forgiveness back at me. In this light, I begin to see what my illusions about myself kept hidden. I begin to understand the holiness of all living things, including myself and their oneness with me. Lesson 57. Walking out of the prison that was never locked. All right, let's sit by the fire for this one. Not a literal fire, unless you've got one going. Just the kind that warms the heart and illuminates the mind. Let's take this slow, like sipping a cup of something warm, and let's really feel into what these words are saying. I am not a victim of the world I see. Imagine you're in a prison cell. You've been in there so long that you've made peace with it. You've even decorated a bit, hung some pictures, made a schedule, gotten used to the routine of pacing back and forth, looking at the same four walls. And then one day, someone walks by and casually mentions, "You know the door isn't locked, right?" You laugh. "What do you mean it's not locked? I've been in here forever." "Yeah, you just have to walk out." You hesitate. This can't be right. You've been conditioned to believe in this cell. The walls feel real. The limitations feel real. But then you get curious. You push on the door and sure enough, it swings open. That's what Jesus is saying here. The world you see, the one where you feel stuck, trapped, weighed down by responsibilities, fears and disappointments, is only real because you believe in it. It can be completely undone if you choose to stop seeing yourself as a victim. And here's the thing, mighty companions. Nothing holds me in this world. Only my wish to stay keeps me a prisoner. So why do we wish to stay? Why, when given an open door, do we hesitate? Because freedom is terrifying when you've grown comfortable with chains. Because victimhood gives us an identity. Because suffering, though painful, is familiar, but today we give it up. We walk into the sunlight. I have invented the world I see. This one's a mic drop moment. Not, I have created the world I see. I have invented it. Creation belongs to God. Invention is making something up. This is like dreaming up a horror story and then forgetting you're the one who wrote it. You imagine a haunted house full of shadows and whispers, and then you convince yourself it's real. You sit there trembling, forgetting that at any moment you could turn on the lights and see that none of it was ever there. I made up the prison in which I see myself. This means that every limitation I believe about myself, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, I'll never be free, is just a story I've been telling myself. And if I invented this world, I can stop believing in it. I can step into creation instead of invention. I can say I was bitterly mistaken in this belief which I no longer want. There is another way of looking at the world. There's always another way, isn't there? Ever been in a heated argument, certain you're right, only to have someone offer a completely different perspective that shifts everything? Maybe you saw someone's actions as rude, but later you learned they were having the worst day of their life. Maybe you saw an obstacle as a setback, but it turned out to be a redirection towards something better. Maybe you saw loss as a tragedy, but over time it became a doorway to a deeper understanding of love. Jesus is saying, since the purpose of the world is not the one I ascribe to it, there must be another way of looking at it. This is where we start retraining the mind. Instead of seeing the world as a prison, what if we saw it as a place of freedom? What if everything we think is happening to us is actually happening for us? What if every heartbreak, every struggle, every loss was actually a doorway out of the prison cell? It's all about perception. Same world, different vision. I could see peace instead of this. Right now, you could think of something that stresses you out. Go ahead, just pick one thing. Now, imagine zooming out, like taking off a pair of dark glasses and putting on a new pair that only sees peace. What happens to that stress? Does it shrink? Does it start to look like an illusion? Does it seem optional? When I see the world as a place of freedom, I realize that it reflects the laws of God instead of the rules I made up for it to obey. There it is again. The world reflects what I choose to see. If I see war, I will find war. If I see anger, I will find anger. If I see peace, I will find peace. The world isn't changing. My mind is. My mind is part of God's, and I am very holy. Let's sit with this one for a second. My mind is part of God's. That means my thoughts, when aligned with truth, aren't small. They aren't weak. They aren't powerless. They are of God. And if my mind is part of God's, that means the light that I sometimes feel flickering in me, the part that yearns for something more, the part that knows love is real, the part that gets glimpses of peace, is not a tiny candle. It's a piece of the sun. The world I look upon has taken on the light of my forgiveness and shines forgiveness back at me. Forgiveness isn't about letting people off the hook. It's about releasing the illusion of separation. When I see with God's mind, I don't see enemies. I don't see guilt. I don't see victims and villains. I see one thing: love. Everything else was just shadows in the prison cell. So, where does that leave us? Today, we step into the sunlight. Not tomorrow. Not when circumstances improve. Not when we feel ready. Right now. Because the door was never locked. Because we invented the walls. Because there is always another way of looking at the world. Because we could see peace instead. Because we are part of God and we are very holy, and because freedom is ours the moment we decide to take it. Let's walk out together.